Hello, Violet Richele.
Hello, Angelo. Gur.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So, I wanted to interview you about the transformations that have occurred over the last few years. And I thought to start by asking you if you could tell us a little bit about your childhood, how you grew up, what the circumstances were, anything that seems relevant to you.
Okay. I just want to give a little bit of space to see what comes.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess what I could say about childhood was it was very chaotic. A lot of trauma, a lot of abuse, I guess. Yeah. So I grew up in a foster home from very young, and then didn't have a lot of contact with my parents, my birth parents. Some I'd see them like maybe once a month, but it was always hard. I think important. I guess the important thing to I'm trying to think what are the most important things to share about that part of childhood. I think one of the most important things was that I always remembered um, when I would see my mom once a month. I'd see my mom once a month in the supervised setting, and I always like yearned for my mother. And I remember leaving in the car that, obviously I was a kid, I didn't drive, but so that I would be in the backseat of the car and I would feel this, my throat would feel like so tight, like this choking feeling in my throat. And I don't even think anybody ever told me, but somehow I energetically intuited that that's bad, a bad thing, and that I shouldn't feel it. And and also intuited to hold back sadness, because I think that was sadness. Like I just was sad to leave my mom. Um, so I think that's kind of probably an important thing to note as far as the trauma side. I remember I had OCD, like a really weird person. I don't mean to judge OCD, but I had it. I had it really strong, like the sense of needing to control the desk in front of me. My nightstand before I went to bed always had to be the same way, and that to me relates, like, in retrospect now, relates to like just needing to have some sort of control in such a chaotic upbringing. Um, there's that. That's part of it. I guess I'm picking out like segments to share. I don't know if it's coming across fluid or not,
Mhm.
but
I remember you telling me you would uh, color on your desk or write on your desk,
yeah,
and how
yeah,
captivating the visual experience was, and tracing the walls and so forth.
yeah. That's uh, it's so precious to me now looking back, seeing like now that I'm an artist and a creative person, and that I'm very visual. But yeah, I had this big white desk, and I was alone a lot. This is before the foster home, so I think I went to the foster home at 8 years old. So from as far as I can remember back, which I don't even know if it was like 4 or 5, maybe. So somewhere in those really young years, up until 8, I had this big white desk, and I was alone a lot. And I just drew on my desk all the time. I would draw little monsters and little aliens and squiggles. And that desk was kind of like my best friend, because it was like a creative experience for me that felt like I just always was very visual, and I didn't know like what it was. Um, like when people would talk to me, um, like it was really hard for me to understand like what they were saying sometimes with the language part, but I was like tracing their face, and and just like listening to, like, visually listening and feeling the movement of their body more than I was listening to their the story or the words they were saying. So the words just kind of jumbled in my brain. It didn't make a whole lot of sense. um, and so then when I would sit alone, I would trace the room. Like I would trace every single thing in the room. And I had this, it's so funny because I haven't thought about it in years, but I just thought of it this morning, recording. I had this, uh, I guess photographic memory is what it's called. So I would, draw the whole entire room, everything that I saw. And then I could tell you, like, if I close my eyes, I see the picture like very clearly. And I could tell you like exactly where, like there was a blue pin on the corner of that painting on that magnet board right there. So it was really cool. But I thought it was kind of weird, like, because I was so alone and my internal experience was even more alone. Like I was alone externally, and internally I was even more alone. So I thought like that I was weird for a lot of my childhood, a lot of my life actually. And then, yeah, so I didn't tell anybody about it. I didn't have a confidant or anybody to talk to, but at some point I got this library book and it was about photographic memory. And I remember that book was like, oh, it was so precious. And it was like a kid's book. So it was quite simple, but it was just sharing how like her daily experience throughout having photographic memory. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I have. That's so amazing. So that was kind of cool. I remember like that book being like, I guess my friend in some way, because it showed me that like it's a normal thing. It's something that some people have. So yeah, there's that. Gosh, what else? I remember distinctly asking, yeah, and I apologize, like the memory just comes like so jumbled for me. I don't really ever think about childhood, let alone the story of my life. I really don't think about it at all anymore. But I remember when I was a kid that I would be looking at the adults. So I was in the foster home. There was 9 other kids, and there was like younger kids that were grandkids of the foster parents. So there was a lot of kids, a lot of people around, a lot of aunts and uncles. So it was, around a lot of people when I was young. And I think I went to the foster home at 8. And then I remember like internally, like watching adults move and listening to them talk. And I just thought they were like so weird. Like I thought, what are they like? What is that? Like, it doesn't seem right. And what was the most obvious thing to me was when, like, as a foster kid, they have you going through the system of like therapy and that sort of thing. So my foster mom would go to she'd talk to the therapist and the social workers and stuff and say, oh, her experience, or this is what's happening with her. And that would be her idea of how my experience was. But I felt like she never actually ever paid attention to me or asked me what my experience was. So when I was sitting there in a meeting about my experience, how is this kid doing? I felt like the adults were talking about my experience, but nobody was asking me, hey, what's your experience? Like, what's happening for you? So I thought that was really weird because her interpretation of it wasn't accurate. It wasn't, I was like, well, that's not true. That's not true. I kept going, well, why are they like, why? And I didn't understand. I would just sit there and be like, I don't understand that. But I was really shy and quiet and like, I think I was in such a trauma fear response from just going through some really heavy stuff, really young. But I always remember going, these adults are really weird. I'm going to do something different in this lifetime. I don't know what it is. And I probably didn't even intuit it in that kind of sentence until, later, but it was like, no, I'm going to do it different. I would see my mom that was, having issues in her life, and my dad, and I just see all this chaos and not like no structure and nobody doing anything, I guess you could say, the right way. And I don't mean to judge people that have a harder life, but I was like, I don't want that. I was just like, I can't wait to grow up. I can't wait to be an adult so I can do my own things, so I can figure out my own stuff. So I think that would be an important thing to note.
I can totally relate to that. Yeah. Dysphoria of being a child and watching adults do what adults do and talk the adult talk. And I remember, as you were describing this, I could feel it. I remember so distinctly knowing that whatever they're talking about, or in a sense, how they're responding to one another and how they're interacting it doesn't feel right somehow. There's something missing there, or it felt uncomfortable, but I had no idea why. I didn't even really know that it felt uncomfortable. It just had that feel to it. But at the same time, sometimes, but not all the time, I could feel their emotions, and I didn't even know what that was. Like I could feel the sadness underneath. I could feel. And so there was such a discord between what they acted like or how they communicated And even what they were saying, I could follow what they're saying, but it still was like so disconnected. And then sometimes I would feel this like deep pain with them, and that I just, when you described all that, that's exactly what I reflected on. And it never actually went away. I still do that. I still feel that, but it's felt in a very different way now.
Different way. Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, yeah, that's true for me as well. Like I cried so much. Like I remember feeling, I think I was just like a shameful, terrified, sad child, and, when you think about it, like I'm obviously well into my adulthood now. And I think about it like a kid having to go through that is really not okay. It's very tragic. Especially, I would describe myself as a kind of gifted person in a lot of ways. Like my brain is not a typical brain. It works a little different. And, I think it's genius. Like when I sit back now in my life and watch like how my brain problem solves creatively, how I paint, like all of these things, it's like, it feels like, it feels a little dysphoric too in a sense, but it just feels like, wow, like, and I always thought for a long time in my early 20s that if I would have had a better childhood, then I wouldn't have suffered so much. And maybe that would have been true, but now I don't know if that would necessarily be true. But now I'm like, I absolutely agree that's a tragic and like really hard childhood to go through. But I'm so grateful. Like it makes me like, I want to cry, not because of the tragedy, but because I'm so grateful to go through something so hard in this lifetime. Because it just really feels to me like that's how it was supposed to be. Like, for whatever reason, maybe to wake up in this lifetime, but the spirit just was pushing through all of these like hard things to really get alive again, to really get full expression again. So yeah, it's precious, especially now living a life of like fullest expression and love.
So I wanted to touch on two things. One is something I remembered you telling me, and another is love, of course. But I remember also you describing, if you want to talk about it, if not, it's fine, but an actual near-death experience you had when we were, I don't remember.
Oh gosh.
But you were quite young.
You have a better memory of my story than I do. I love it. But I don't have a great memory even pre-awakening. So there's that, unless it's pictures, of course. But yeah. So when I was 3 years old, yeah. And I will say like preface on like this childhood stuff. Like, I don't know. I guess a thought comes of like, what if my birth mother watches this interview or something? And I really don't necessarily care, but I do want to point out that like, this is the way I experienced those experiences. And I think everybody has the right to share and experience them how they experience them. So I'm not saying my vision of anybody else's experience is accurate. I'm just basically trying to share how it happened for me. So I just wanted to say that if somebody I know from childhood watches or something. But yeah, I was at the lake. I was 3 years old. I was at the lake with my mom, and actually this might be my first memory. I've never actually thought of what's my first memory, but it's young. I was 3 years old. So anyways, it might be my first memory, but I was at the lake with my mom, and my brother and uncle were on this little boat in the lake. And then my mom was like there was like a beach kind of sand area and shallow area. And then I was like playing with my mom in the sand and stuff. And then I remember her friends, like I remember this very visually still. Her friends were like that direction way over there. And there's like this rock, I think that's part of the, like almost a cove, like there's two rocks and there's this beach and then it goes out into the lake. And so I remember we were near this rock on this side and playing like in the sand water area. And then I remember her friends were, they said, hey. And I won't say her name for the purpose of this, but they were screaming her name, like, hey, come over here. And they're like, visually to me as a kid, that was really far. I don't know if it was actually really far, but it was like way over there. It was a big lake, and maybe just because I was so little, but it was big. And so she turns around and she goes, I don't remember what she said to me specifically, but she goes, stay right here or something. And I was like, okay, like I thought that was really weird. But this feeling of yearning, like I felt like, this is probably a little bit of backstory on this feeling of like, I remember so many times as a kid, like this crying, screaming, like, no, mom, I want to go with you. Even when she would go to the grocery store, even when she like just wouldn't take me with her for whatever reason, I always felt this attachment, like I wanted to be close to her. So she went and swam off, and I remember like, no, I want to go with you. And I was, I walked into the lake, and sure, I'm, 3 years old, so I'm not, but a foot or two tall. And I remember I just keep walking to the lake with this like visceral pull to like, hey, I want to be with my mom. And then at some point, I remember my feet not being able to stand anymore for my head to stay underwater. Like I remember that I could feel that almost now in my feet, just remembering it and remembering like the water starting to. So I guess I walked off from shallow to deep end, and I think it was like just right there. And then I remember like fighting and screaming, like I kind of already was when I was running towards that direction. And then something let go. All the screaming and kicking of trying to prevent drowning, the natural instinct to do that, let go. And I just remember floating there. And it felt like everything was far, far away. But there was so much peace. There was so much peace. And I don't know how long that lasted. It just felt very still and peaceful. I could have stayed there forever. But life brought me back for some reason. I started to hear my brother in the boat telling my uncle, like, oh my gosh. And they like coming over to me. It's like screaming my name. And then they pull this it's like a little motorboat. Gosh, it's so interesting. I remember this experience so well. So they came over to me and pulled me onto the boat and brought me back to life. But yeah, I died.
It's such a wild story.
It's really wild. Yeah. Yeah. And that created a whole lifetime of fear of water. Like I was terrified of water my whole entire lifetime until I didn't learn to swim or anything. And I was even terrified of water when we were in Hawaii and I did the scuba diving thing. And that was to me like facing a deep fear. And I'm so glad I did, because I get to see, like, for me, like facing fear is like my MO in this lifetime, because I just want to like be able to experience more fully. And I just have that draw to that. So yeah, I faced that fear, which would have been, what was it, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. So yeah, early 30s, faced that fear of water. And then that's when my ocean series came about. Yeah. And I kind of been painting oceans for 2 years now.
Yeah, they're beautiful. I hope everybody checks them out. We'll give information towards the end of the video about where people can find your stuff.
Yeah. Thanks for giving me the space to share that story. It's like I said, like even these tragic things, like when I'm able to go back into them, like it amazes me how the photographic memory still works pretty well. Yeah. I feel like I get to experience for the first time when I share it. Yeah, but it feels different. It doesn't, like, I remember in my early 20s sharing these experiences of childhood where I would like cry and I would be like choked up. It'd be hard for me to share them because I felt really traumatized still, but I don't feel that attachment to them anymore. I feel like I'm sharing a story about somebody else's life, like a book I read or a movie I watched. Yeah. So, but it's beautiful. Yeah.
The other thing you've mentioned that I wanted to reflect on was you mentioned love. And I remember towards the beginning of when I met you, you describing this really clearly and very powerfully, a sense of unconditional love, or a sense when you were very young of the ability to express love in life is sort of the central, I'm paraphrasing what you told me, but sort of the central theme of your life. But at a young age, you learned like it's almost like you couldn't express it the way it felt natural because no one really taught you to, probably, but also you had to learn to self-protect and all that. Can you touch on that?
Yeah. To me, that's like precious. I guess my living prayer, kind of, to love unapologetically. And I think it kind of relates to, like, it's the love piece, but it's also the, like, just expressing naturally piece that, to me, now I see how that relates, like going back into when I felt that choking sensation when I left my mom, or when I felt sadness and I just felt to bury it. But to me, I literally felt this like heaviness in my chest for most of my life, through childhood, through my 20s. And I felt this really heaviness. Like, I just felt I was always really sensitive. Like, it's interesting, like these certain books, like the book about, that I found when I was a kid about, photographic memory, like really like helped me understand myself a little bit better. And then in my 20s, I was having a really hard time in my early 20s, like 20, 21, 22. And I just was absorbing everybody's energy around me. And I worked in like, really busy environments. And so I didn't understand why I would randomly be like shouting or crying, like the emotions would just come unhindered. And I was like, well, I know I'm suffering. I know I have my own story of suffering, but like none of what's feeling right now relates to that specifically that I could find. So I was like, why am I always suffering this bad? Why am I always feeling this heavy? And somehow I think I probably was researching, I found the highly sensitive person book, and empath. And so that's when I realized I was really empathic, and it was hard for me to decipher energetically whose pain I was feeling, if it was mine or theirs. And to me, that was, that book was really powerful to find. And there was a lot of grounding techniques then that I learned, and how to decipher like the energetic boundary of feeling everybody's pain. But circling back to the specific thing with love, I felt this heaviness in my heart, and something to me felt not right. Like, again, why were these adults interacting that way? And then as I became an adult myself and interacted in life, I was like, why are, like, people would talk to me, like a friend, even like a close friend, someone I knew for a while, and it would be this weird small talk thing. And I remember always feeling like, why are we not, like, you can cry, like, it's okay to cry. Like, I don't know. I didn't tell her that or tell people I was interacting with that, but it just felt like this falsehood we were all interacting as. And I like kept going, like, this is confusing. Like, I don't actually understand this. This doesn't make any sense. Why can't we just express naturally? And and this is in retrospect how I'm wording it, but I just felt the heaviness for the most part, and felt confused, and felt like I was the weird one. But I got the message that you can't feel this. You can't just tell somebody you're sad, or you just feel sad for them, or you're just angry at them. That's not what we're taught. And every situation that I had been in for years, over years, it was like, well, no. And if I would become close to somebody, it would be a complete disaster. They wouldn't know what to do. They would think like they would either just not, a new friend would just not talk to me again if I told them like my experiences. So it was really like, I don't understand how come this isn't working when I'm sharing the best I can authentically. And that's not to say there wasn't some friends that throughout the path that were good friends, that were able to connect on some sort of deeper level. But I just wanted to love everybody. I just wanted to hug everyone, and I just wanted to love everybody. I felt like this nurturing mother sense that I just wanted my heart to break open and love unapologetically. And yeah, I remember when I met you, and then that, like, the things I shared with you that first night were like, obviously I know now it's like, it wasn't because of you. It's just because of this force of unconditional love. But I'd never met anybody that was able to unconditionally love me. So I didn't know what that was, but I knew that was what my yearning was in some way. And I remember when I met you that night, the things I shared with you, my deepest sorrows, I never shared with anybody. Never. I was terrified to share with anyone. So yeah, I shared them with you that night. And I remember that next morning, I think it was, or maybe the next evening at some point within that first 24-hour period, I sent you a video of me crying. And I remember I was saying, I just feel like I want to love everybody. And my heart breaks. It hurts me to hold this amount of love in. And I don't remember what you said, but I'm sure you were probably guiding me to like, just let it open, let your heart open. Which has kind of been this path for me the last 4 years. And, yeah, I love it so much. And I feel like this love is the love of my life, like unconditional love, unapologetic spirit, just full embodiment, full expression. That is the love of my life. And I feel like the reason why I talk about this stuff is because everybody can absolutely embody this. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not something we're adopting or getting from anything else. It's just what we're just losing, the things that veil it, the things that crowd it. And then your heart breaks, and then your heart breaks, and it's bigger and bigger and bigger. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's so beautiful.
I love it. I'm so in love with love. It's just everywhere. Like life is so romantic in some way. Yeah. Even in the hard times too, like I know people sometimes interpret that as like, oh, she's in this happy, joyous state all the time. And that's not really the case. It's just, in love with whatever is happening.
Yeah. One thing I've always been incredibly impressed about with you is that considering what you've been through and how much trauma and just major challenges in life, everybody has trauma, but you're very much on the end of the scale of what I've seen in people. And you always find your way back to love and to truth and to letting go and to embodying right in this moment, natural expression, which just has a feel to it. So I commend you for that. And I mean, it's inspiring. Also, I with that said, like life has given you incredible challenges, but it's actually given you grace in very interesting forms.
Perfect amount of challenges.
Sometimes it pushes you beyond what you think you can do, but it turns out okay. But also life has given you very interesting, I noticed, coincidences of people you meet. So your parents, your adoptive parents and so forth, in the early 20s, are incredibly helpful. And some of the most like altruistic people you'd ever meet, and you would never know just by looking at them. But when you sit down and interact with them for 5 minutes, you feel incredible amount of compassion. And life has been very interesting with you. It has led you along so perfectly to this that we'll talk about. It just fascinates me. And I see it in everyone. I see this chronicity, the synchronicity, but for you, it's like so obvious. Like there's nothing else you could have done except for wake up. That's how I see it. There's just no other way.
Me too.
You're not going this way. You're not going that way. You're not going this way. You're just going straight down this path, and whether you like it or not.
I think it's valuable to talk about as a little bit as well is, thanks for the reminder, because like I don't know where I found it years ago, but my favorite quote is, friends are the family we meet along the way. And I really feel like that. I feel like best friends with everybody I meet, even more so now through this path. But I just felt like I wasn't I'm pretty introverted as it is. And I don't have, I don't know, I don't seem to be a super social person, like finding a lot of social activities, going in a lot of group things. It's kind of just never been what I was guided towards. But so I spent a lot of time alone over like childhood and adult years even. And what was pivotal was like, I meet these, like you said, synchronicity, where I meet these people that are of all ages. Like my parents adopted me when I was 22, I think. I met them before that, but they legally adopted me when I was 22. So, and they were just a random, like I left my partner, and then I was working, trying to be on my own. I had nowhere to go. So a lot of times when I would be attached to some sort of relationship or partnership, because that would be stability or help or guidance in some way. And like, I'm talking about really young, like from 18, actually I met him at 17 to 21. And during that time, I was like terrified of life. Like as much as I wanted to be an adult and learn my own things, I was not a strong, confident person at all. I had a lot of PTSD, a lot of photographic memory that would come back from trauma in childhood that I would just experience at random. So I'd say PTSD. My OCD, like I mentioned, was really bad at that time. Like I couldn't it was very a visceral OCD. Like it just really bothered me to touch things or to be in public restaurants. And there was all sort of little other OCD things as well. But life's even my first partner, I would say, like my first love in a romantic relationship, even though that kind of ended kind of crazy and stuff as well, he was like, I was 16 and then I didn't really want to be in the system anymore. I didn't really want to go to school anymore because like there was all this stuff that happened in school. Like I got jumped and bullied and all this stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm really ready to go in my own life, but I don't know what that is. And at 16, not having like family or anybody to lean on, but wanting to get away from the seeming family, foster home and all that. Then I randomly meet him. He was like 10 years older than me. So he was a little more stable in his adult life. And so we were together for a long time. And that was really a stabilizing thing until it wasn't for me. But then when I left him, I had no choice. It was like the relationship got so bad that I had to put everything in the car and just leave and go where. So then I lived at like motels and stuff. And I went and was with my birth mother a little bit and through that period, but I was like, okay, I got to get a job. I got to figure this out. And I was actually in beauty school at the time, but wasn't able to finish. But I went and did waitressing. I found like this, I don't know how I reconnected with her, but this lady that was my birth mom's friend when I was really little, I stayed with her for a little bit of that early childhood. And I don't have a lot of memory of that, but I somehow reconnected with her because she was still in the same area and she owned a little cafe. So she was like, I'll give you a job. You could be a waitress. So then I was a waitress and then they also owned a tanning salon. And then I was working at the tanning salon. So I was just trying to be on my own. She let me stay with her. And so she tried to help me as well. And then at the tanning salon, I met my adoptive parents, Michelle and Fred, and they're just very like cool people. Like just, Michelle would sit there and just talk with me and like all day and like while I'm working and stuff. And Fred would come in. They were just nice people. And like when I needed things, I was like, just talking about my life with them and sharing that, like if I needed, but then I needed a car. And it wasn't like I was asking them for a car by any means, but they're like, okay, let me figure out how to help you with that. And and they've not only done this for me, they've done this for multiple young women. They're just like loving, supportive people that do what they can to give. And so they helped me with that. And we just vibed. They just became my parents like over time. And it was so beautiful. And I won't talk too much more about the details of this, but then at some point I was renting a house and then there was a lot of issues. And then the guy wasn't paying the mortgage. So my rent, basically the house went to auction. Some guy walked in randomly one day. He was like, this is my house. And I was like, what? I'm paying the rent here. Like I'm working 4 jobs to pay the rent here. So I had to just leave. I had 30 days to just leave and I had nowhere to go. And I was like, okay. And I think I was probably 21 at the time. So I'm still really young, and then I was planning this trip to go to Florida with my girlfriend already. And I was like, what do I do? Should I still go on the trip? She's like, yeah, come. She's like, you can figure it out when you get back. So on the trip, I meet her friend. That is this really nice guy, older guy. And he's like, just talking to me, get to know me. And like the trip ended up like everybody like ended up with a group going to San Diego for a wedding. And so we're all together. And so he was just friendly and talking to me and asked me about my life and stuff. And I told him this story and he goes, oh, well, I have a house in Vegas and my son's kid is living there to go to school. You can go live there if you want. And I was like, I don't know him, but I somehow trust that. And I'm like, okay. So I went back to California and I I sold most of the furniture, put everything that could fit in the car. I had the 2 cats and Mr. Kenny that's still with me, Kenneth Cole, and drove to Vegas. Yeah. Yeah. So my point of all that was this pivotal people, like you were saying, in my life that like, I didn't have a big group of friends. I didn't connect with a lot of people, but I connected with pivotal people that just became my family. And it's just miraculous. Like even just like how I randomly met you when I was ready to wake up and all of these things, that's just like life was just going, nope, not that. You're going to do this instead. Nope. So it wasn't really me letting go. It was life taking everything away that I thought I could maybe lean on to show me something else each time. So
yeah, I mean, it's just like stepping stones or breadcrumbs. Like it's amazing. You also you've mentioned to me, you don't have to go deep into this, but you've mentioned to me in the past, like you in your early 20s, like as you described, you really lacked confidence, lacked simple life skills about how to manage all of it. And within a few years, actually, I think you became sort of the opposite, a very confident person, very fortified person. But maybe you can talk. And I think you had mentioned you read some books on self-help and that sort of thing. Maybe just touch on that, because I think a lot of people also have that experience.
Sure. Yeah. And I guess probably the question from sharing this developmental, I guess, stages, probably a question a lot of people are maybe thinking is like the PTSD stuff and the trauma stuff, like where does that change, right? And I don't know, I didn't have a magic tool necessarily of how I worked with that specifically, but when I was forced to go do my own self and work and take care of things, it was almost like it almost just kind of dissolved over time for me, because I didn't have anybody to lean on. I didn't have anybody to, like my first partner was like leaning on him so when things would happen scary, I'd have somebody to hold, like in a public place or something, when memories would come back. But I didn't have that. I had to just be on my own. So I just kind of over time that kind of dissolved with me just persevering and working. And then I think through work, I started to feel like good about myself because I was earning and I was taking care of myself and taking care of animals. And so I think that kind of made me realize like what I always wanted when I was a kid was just to be an adult and have my own life and take care of myself. So I was really excited about that kind of stuff. And then when I moved to Vegas is I think really, really shift, because I remember a time where, most of my childhood and my early adulthood, like I didn't have anything new. I never had new shoes. Everything was always hand me down. That was just the life from like, being in a foster home with all these kids and all this stuff. So I never bought anything for myself. I never did anything nice for myself. And when I moved to Vegas, as I said, I was in beauty school. So Vegas was a really good place for me because I loved dancing. I loved hair and makeup, and I loved acting and modeling. So all of those things are like, you can, a young, pretty girl in Vegas, there's so many jobs. You just get with an agent and then they put you on this model job. So I was doing modeling. I was doing makeup for other girls. I was making costumes. I was working in a hair salon. So I was, and dancing. And it was like all of the fun, creative, expressive things that I loved since I was really, really young. So I remember being like 10 and I got a hand sewing machine and made myself a Britney Spears costume when I was really young. So I was just always like girly and creative. So that city like really supported me to be on my own and make decent money. And so I remember at some point I just started becoming confident, like modeling and learning like how to be in my body and be present through those kind of type jobs. And then I remember at some point I was like, I'm going to buy myself stuff. So I spent like a lot of money on like a wardrobe for myself. And I just really loved it. I wear high heels like almost every day. That was a really fun part. But I think just through maybe it was through creativity. I've never thought of it this way. I think through creative expression, I was able to become confident and survive. But it was also partly, that's like the good part of it. But I think that the other side of that is I was hurt so much young. So when I decided to just do this on my own, I'm not going to need anybody. I'm not going to do that because it was so hard. Like it was so hard to need somebody and have that completely crumble, like my first relationship. And once I kind of internally decided, like, I'm going to try to do this, I was emotionally cut off. So I was really good. I found a way to be really good at controlling situations by being bubbly and fun and pretending I'm confident. And I think a confidence persona was built, but it was built out of control. It was built of fear of loss of control and fear of, during this time, I would say I wasn't like, the way I express is how I wanted to express my heart for so long. I didn't want to express my heart necessarily this time. I was like, nope, I didn't want a relationship. I didn't want to be close to anybody. Emotionally, I was just like closed off. And I think that was a valuable thing to do at that stage, I would say. But yeah, during that time, I did read, I found The Secret, and that was really fascinating to me. I read books about highly sensitive person, empathy. yeah, all kinds of different self-help things. I can't remember any other titles, but I remember it was The Secret was when I first moved to Vegas, and I was like, whoa, that's really cool. And in one sense, that kind of really did play out in my life and in a fun way. So anyways,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I think that's really good for people to hear, because I think, especially now, the self-help sort of genre, community, and so forth, it's big business, and a lot of people get involved. And a lot of people ask me, what do you think about The Secret? What do you think about law of attraction, self-help? And, I think you exemplify the way to use it properly. And that is, if you come from a place of feeling completely disempowered, being disempowered, but behaviorally having no skill set, low confidence, you can actually use that to really change yourself in the relative, to a degree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes you have to go beyond that, and hopefully people do go beyond that, but it can be very helpful just to develop people skills, to develop confidence, to develop a work ethic, all that. And so, yeah, I again, I commend you. You did what made the most sense, and it worked, and it was effective. But you also mentioned you weren't touching into the emotion side of things as much, and not trusting people, and not trusting maybe yourself at the deepest level, and so forth.
Yeah.
Which I think that's where it goes with, with self-help. A lot of times is you get to a place where it's like, okay, I've learned all these skills, the skill sets, I've learned confidence, I've learned to put my attention on what I can do instead of what I can't do, and work at it and stuff. But there's still something not being addressed. Right. And I think if somebody gets to that place, more self-help isn't really the answer. Awakening might be, but
or just even like, I think at some point at the end of that kind of path for me, I started to feel that intense feeling of my heart, that I explained. And I wanted to like be more authentic. I started realizing like this persona and stuff worked for so long. It just wasn't, I could manage it. I could still make it work, and I could still do that, but it started to feel unauthentic and in a painful way. Like, I don't know. I think parts of my life, things like I stay with things because they're comfortable and familiar. But at some point there's this shift in like feeling like something is comfortable and familiar is more, I feel more afraid of that than the unknown of what that isn't. And, it's just this shift of like, I stay with it because I'm like, I don't know what it's going to look like if I don't have this. I don't know what it's going to look like if I don't have this construct or this relationship or this job or this security in some way. And I mean, to all rights though, too, you talk about a child that never was safe and built this persona on safety and control and confidence. I think that was very valuable. But like, there's just these pivotal points where at some point, like I'm staying with that because I'm afraid of like whatever that is. And then at some point I'm like, whoa, I know what this will look like. I could project what maybe this would look like for the next few years. And I don't know that, and it doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel authentic to me in some way. Maybe I didn't express it the way I'm saying it now, but it felt like, okay. Then I would start to slowly turn to the unknown because I was less afraid of the unknown. And I was more afraid of what I did know, because what I did know wasn't accurate in some way, wasn't authentic in some way. So that's kind of a turning point of a few different parts of my life. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. So I suppose, unless there's something else you want to say about the kind of preamble, all of that story has led up to what we're always really talking about. What's always really happening. We met, we met 4 years ago. We were just talking about this almost to the day. We're a couple days off, but
3 days. Yeah.
We met.
Maybe we should just re-record on the 23rd.
Yeah.
And scratch all this. I'm just kidding.
Such good stuff, or I would, but
yes.
We met 4 years ago.
Yeah.
In improv.
Yeah. Improv. I guess a little previous to that, I was married, and marriage wasn't working out, and it was decently good marriage, I would say. I was feeling that authentic point in my life again, where I was like, man, I'm more ready to go to this unknown thing than stay in this known. But so I started going after 8 months of depression. My husband moved out to a different state, and we just weren't really together, and I was all alone. And so I was really depressed. And then at some point, something got me out of bed and out of that pattern. And then I don't know, I hadn't done acting stuff since I was in high school, and I always loved acting. And so I just went and for some reason I thought of acting, and I started researching acting classes. So I started an acting class, and then I did this I did this class in LA. I did this 2-week acting program in LA, and they had improv in their program. So I was like, oh, I really love this, because I've always loved comedy. And so then I came back to Colorado, and I found a comedy improv class to join. And then I was there, and I was actually really nervous. My girlfriend had come to town to help me go for the first time, because I was so nervous and shy to be around people. But my third class, after class, Angela walks up to me, and do you remember what you said? I'll let you.
Yeah, I said, I really like your energy.
Yeah.
And you said, oh, thanks, something like that. And then I think I said, you're extraordinarily present. And then I said, do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah. Yeah, you did. You said, do you know what I mean? And I remember thinking, intellectually, I didn't know what you mean, but I knew what you meant. Something instinctually was like, yeah, I remember I was like, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So I remember, so in these, they're like drop-in improv classes, they have somewhere between 15 and 30 people or whatever. And a lot of the events, a lot of the exercises they put you through, which if anyone's interested, go do it.
Improv's amazing. Yeah. For even shy, introverted people like me.
Yeah. It's not like you go up on stage and do like a bit that you've memorized. It's not stand-up comedy. It's like interactive stuff. But so there's this, circles of people often, and you look around and see everyone. Well, you, and I've told you this before, but you were extraordinarily present. And I just, it's something I feel. I can just feel it in people. And I bump into, I don't know, maybe once a month or every 2 months or something, I'll just bump into somebody that is like wide open. It's like, you can just see the universe looking through their eyes. There's also what they think is themselves looking through their eyes. And it's like, you don't know where the identity is, but it's just obvious. I don't know why. I can see it in your eyes. I can see the way you move and that sort of thing. So I noticed it throughout the entire class, of course. And then at the end, I'm always curious about people like that. Sometimes I'll come up and talk to them if it's a casual situation. Sometimes I won't. But yeah, with you, I was just like, oh yeah, I'm going to check this out. So I went out and said that. And like within, I don't know,
I'm glad you did.
minutes, we're having like really, really deep conversation.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Which is the kind of conversation I'd love to have. And it's the only one I'm really interested in, really, with people. And yeah, so we obviously just hit it off. But I think by within an hour or so, I'm like pointing very, very directly to Awakening, and you're just like absorbing it. I mean, you can tell your version of this, but like you're just so like, oh yeah. This is what we're talking about. This is what I want to talk about. And I'm like, yeah. And so that's how you felt to me. You just felt energetically very clear, very open. And, it's always fascinating. Like when I feel that, it's like, where is this person? Because some people, they don't actually want to wake up, but they're very clear. And they're like, oh, that's weird. I don't want to talk about that. They're just keeping the door closed. It'll happen sooner or later. But other people are like, oh yeah, this is, the most interesting thing to me. And I'm always a little curious, do they know it? Like, have they done spiritual work? Do they realize what is like ready to pop in them right at this moment or not? So it just makes me curious. And if I get a vibe, the person is interesting, I'll go talk to them. So that was kind of it. But we very quickly got into sort of very deep, very intimate conversation and fascinating.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I remember just feeling like for me, I think I was probably waking up, like looking back for many years, because I kept feeling weirder and weirder of a person. Like I kind of already had an identity from childhood that I was the weird one and I was alien to life. But as an adult, I just kept feeling weirder and weirder. And even like, go back to the times where I lived in Vegas and was the confident one, even like being in these situations with, groups and stuff, like fitting in one sense, you could see a picture and it probably looked like I really fit in, but I felt so off. Like it felt like, even I was doing something I loved creatively, expression wise, I just didn't fit in. But I felt like for years there was this ghost. I don't know why I described it as a ghost, but that's just how my interpretation works. There was this ghost energy like following me around going, go ahead and do that next, but you're going to eventually look here. Go ahead and do that next. You're eventually going to look here. And when I got married was when I thought like, okay, this is a stable marriage. Like maybe I'll be able to relax now. And I didn't work for a couple of years in that marriage for the first time since I was 16. So that was a huge gift of just having more time to be with myself and not having to stress about funds and stuff. So that was really a good time, but I still felt like this energy was just right there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right here, I guess I could say now. But yeah, when the marriage was not working and I was like, okay, I just kind of intuitively knew like, that's where I have to go. And I didn't know how or what, but I kind of had the intuition before I met you, and like probably really shortly before I met you during that depression time. And then I met you and you were like talking about it. And to preface as well, I don't know if that's even a word, but to give a little bit of story for people that are listening. I didn't know about non-duality. I wasn't spiritual really. I did some self-help books and some Reiki energy healing stuff, but I didn't meditate all the time. I wasn't spiritual. I wasn't religious. None of that. I didn't know about non-duality at all. I don't even think I read The Power of Now, which is a common one everybody read. I'm pretty sure I heard about it, but yeah. So then, when I met you, it was like, okay, this is it. This is something real. This is something more real. It makes more sense to me than anything ever has. And I didn't know what it was, but I just trusted it. And you were like the perfect stranger. It's like amazing, like how this like is happening in my life. And then boom, perfect stranger. And the first person I share like the most authentic with, like my deepest sorrows with. And then you just told me after that to just sit and ask, who am I? And I remember just you telling me, just sit and feel. And there wasn't a lot of technique or anything around that. It was just ask, who am I? I don't think I specifically asked you how I'm supposed to ask, who am I, or clarified that at all. I was like, okay. So just remember sitting on the balcony for 4 months. And I just was like, who am I? And then like stories and thoughts would come. And then visual memories of traumatic things would come. And I would just go lay on the bed and feel it and cry and feel anger, feel sadness and all those emotions. And I would go back to this focused, who am I? And I remember specifically at one point, I was texting with you and I said, Angelo, I'm sitting asking, who am I? And I realized that I'm a lot of things. Like there's not just one identity I'm looking for. There's a lot of identity. And I was like, that's weird. Cause I thought identity, like who I am, as the character identity wise was this one thing that included all these things. But I realized like all of these different identities didn't relate to one another. They weren't like collected into this one person. And I was like, oh, that's really weird. Like I thought I would find this one, identity, but I was like, oh man. And then I felt like despair because I was like, oh gosh, there's a lot of work then if there's that many identities.
I can totally relate to that. It's so fascinating because, that's why this work is so interesting, because you ask like, in a sense, the most important question, right? Who am I? Shouldn't we already sort of have addressed that?
Shouldn't we know who we are? Yeah.
We actually walk around trying not to look at who we are before this. Yeah. And what you find that can be really destabilizing or disturbing or surprising is first of all, you don't find one thing, you don't find a person in there somewhere, but what you find is all these like agendas and fractured pieces of identity you developed at this age and that age and this age. Absolutely. And then they're all like working with one another, sometimes against one another. And you're like, well, wait a minute, which one's me? What if maybe I'm none of these? What the hell am and that's really a good sign, I guess, if somebody's doing this, that it's working, that inquiry is working when it starts to kind of come apart, Yeah. So you're sitting on the porch and you're doing this self-inquiry, asking, who am I? Mm-hmm. Obviously stuff's happening, and clearly you're really, in a sense, being vulnerable because you're willing to feel these emotions coming up, sit with them and coming back to it. And you're starting to notice something very interesting about identity not being a solid one thing in there that you have always sort of assumed. Just because I get so many questions about self-inquiry, about this exact thing, is there anything you can offer for people who feel like they're stuck trying to do self-inquiry? They're not sure if they're doing it right. Usually that's what I get. Or I ask the question, nothing happens. What's the point, kind of thing. Any pointers as far as what you found doing this that may be helpful to people who just find it uninteresting, uncomfortable, or they just don't know what they're doing?
I feel like I want to talk about intuition with it, but I know that I know just by talking to a lot of people about this stuff, some people it seems maybe challenging to know what intuition even is, and I think intuition is something that's hard to even describe like at all. But I think if I could say what intuition is, so if it does, maybe at least some people will get the intuition part that I'm sharing. It's like remember a moment in your life at some point, and I'm sure like at least every human being has had one of these. Like I'm just absolutely sure of it because intuition comes from our truest nature. So try to remember a moment where something just kind of fell into place and you knew it was the right thing. Like maybe it was something with cooking, maybe it was something creatively, maybe it was something with your kids, maybe it was something with your family or your journey or your work, any area. Something that just was like, oh, well, that just made like perfect sense, but I didn't actually have to do anything to construct it. It just kind of fell into place. I would point there for intuition. And with self-inquiry, I think part of the practice needs to be feeling deeper into intuition, feeling what does intuition signature feel like energetically. And that could even be an inquiry question of something about intuition resonates with me, but I don't know what, and I don't know how to find it or feel it. That could be the prayer, the inquiry question even. And I think once we have even a subtle sense of what intuition is, I think that's a good ingredient for self-inquiry of who am I? Because intuition teaches us is to trust something that isn't, it's like the wind. You're trusting the wind to breathe, to fill your lungs with air, but you can't see it. You can't grab the wind and go, here's the wind. And so intuition's kind of like that. So it's a spirit or innate trust in something beyond what seems like you. So I think doing some sort of practice, even if it's maybe reading about intuition, what somebody's written, or if there's meditations about intuition, I don't know if there is, but find into what the signature of intuition feels like distinctly. And I think once you find what that feels like distinctly, you start to reorient to it a little bit and trust it a little bit more. That way, when you're in self-inquiry, when you're asking, who am I? And it's either a blank mind or a mind that's having memories of childhood or whatever. Or these thoughts of like, this is boring. This isn't working. This is too simple. Like, no way. I'm doing it wrong. I got to be doing it wrong. I would say like, feel into the identity of I'm doing it wrong. I'm not the one that can do this right. I think that's like, there's a lot of components to self-inquiry, I would say. I think that's a valuable inquiry. Feel into the emotions that arise, even if they're just in a story. So see if you can find those emotions in the body. Learn what intuition is and what that signature feels like. And trust like the air. Trust like the air, that you trust the air to give you air to breathe, right? To this air, without air, well, our body wouldn't breathe. We would die physically. So trust the air. Trust that the universe that we can't find or feel or put into something solid is guiding this. And it's guided you all along. And there's probably even a moment of intuition in this path where you first saw Angelo's video, or you first read Eckhart Tolle's book, or whatever it was. That was intuition. That moment was like, oh my gosh, this is not that was interesting to you intellectually. It's that your heart recognized something true in it. Your spirit recognized something true in it. So that's what I would say with self-inquiry is to feel into those components. And I guess another thing, a technical thing to say as well is, it doesn't feel like it's something that you're ever going to actually know it's working or not. But when I say trust that the universe is doing what it needs to do, like, inquiry is, in my opinion, very powerful in all the ways. Who am I to start? And then all kinds of different inquiry questions beyond that. And I am endlessly asking inquiry questions it's kind of like my prayer to the universe. Like, I don't know this. I'm kind of curious about this. And then I just wait, and I see it show up in my life, but it doesn't show up in the language of intellect or words. It doesn't show up like that. It shows up like a synchronicity in a moment with another person, or something ending that you knew needed to end that just ended, that needed to end, or it shows up energetically. It shows up, you won't find it the answer in words. So that's why I say, again, feel into that. Sorry, that was probably a little bit all over the place, but
no, that was a really, really good synopsis. Actually, I think that's very, very helpful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I totally agree. The intuition part, it's sort of what you don't see about it that's important. The air, right? If air was solid, we wouldn't be able to breathe it. So,
Mm-hmm.
but its fluidity and its ability to fill any space, of course, makes it possible that we breathe and all that. So I think it's very much like that,
Mm-hmm.
as you describe. It's trust. It comes down to like trusting yourself at some point,
Mm-hmm.
but not what you think you are, though. It's like that's not trusting
the
yourself.
instinct.
Yeah, instinct.
Yeah. The instinct that pulls away from a fire, that pulls the hand away from the fire, that's instinct. The instinct that grabs the baby that's about to fall off the couch, that's the instinct. Trust that. Trust that that's what's got, you didn't pull the baby out. You didn't catch the baby from the couch. Instinct moved the body.
Yeah.
There's this one quote from this movie that I love. It was, love is like the wind. You can't see it, but you can feel it.
Mm.
That's so beautiful. And I would say intuition is like the wind. Mm-hmm. You can't see it, but you can feel it.
Yeah.
And trust that, also the narrative of like, well, I'm not an I'm not an intuitive person. That's like some wizardry or witchery, cool gypsy stuff. No, that's crap. You are. Everybody has intuition. Everybody, because it's born of our true nature. It's just a very powerful component of true nature. So everybody has it. I
agree with that. It's like, it's very common that people have so much self-doubt. They're like, well, I'm not that kind of person, or this topic's not for me. And it's like, but it doesn't have to be for you. And I would never force it on anyone, but it actually is about you. Of course it is. It's about your true nature. It's not about mine or yours or anyone else's.
No,
that one person who wants to introspect, who wants to, let go.
And it is like a muscle too, that like you get more familiar with. Like, I mean, I've shared with you, I won't go into it for the length of time, but I've shared with you how like I always had these little intuition things throughout my life, like maybe once a year back when I was young, and then I didn't trust them. And they would like, it'd be like, for instance, like, I would come home in the middle of summer and I had a wall heater, and I would never have turned the wall heater on in the middle of summer. I lived in a hot place. So I come in and I put a grocery bag there by the heater, and I get this thought that says, the heater's going to burn up that bag. And I go, I disregard it. I go, that's silly. It's the summer. It's not. And for some reason it got cold that night, and my partner turned on the heater and the bag burned up. So that was one example. And that happened like once a year. And then now it happens every day. Stuff like that. Like, so it is a muscle that you learn to really trust and move in this world from.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So then you were doing this self-inquiry, and what happened?
One night I got up from the balcony. I got up from the chair, and there was like these beautiful trees in my backyard. And I think it was like the moon was right there, maybe a full moon or something. But I remember I touched the rails of the balcony, and I was like, that's weird. Like it felt different. Like I felt energetically different. And I was like moving slower, and I looked at the trees and I looked at the moon, and then I looked back at the chair, and everything was so intimate. I was like, I didn't know how to describe it at the time, but I was like, I was like, wait a minute. Where am I? Like, I didn't really feel like I had a location. I felt like I was there right with the tree. I was there right with the moon. I was there right with the touch of the railing. And then I was like, that's really interesting. And then I don't know if we were texting at the time, but then I went to, you were out of town at Adyashanti retreat, I think, if I remember. I went to, that could be wrong. I don't know. I went in the house, and then I went in my closet, and, my husband had moved away, but I still had like full closet of clothes there. So I saw all of this like long hallway. The closet was like this long hallway, and it had all of his clothes and all my clothes. And I remember looking around going like, whose clothes, like whose closet am I in? Like, I felt like, I was like, this is not my stuff. Like, that's really weird. And there was a long mirror there. And I remember I stared in the mirror forever going like, what is this? This is like freaky weird. Like, what is this person thing? Like it was very odd. And I think it just went to bed at some point. Yes, I went to bed at some point. And then when I woke up the next morning, I would say like a full blown awakening had occurred at that point. Like maybe that night was like this gradual thing, and then sleep. And then it was like full on when I woke up. Because everything, like I remember I woke up and I didn't write poems. I didn't write poetry. I didn't read poetry ever. Like it was odd, but then I started writing. I woke up that morning and this poem just came to me, and I was just writing it out, and everything felt so close. Everything felt so intimate. Like I felt like, I don't even know how to really describe that experience. Like I guess I didn't feel like myself anymore. I didn't feel like it contracted itself anymore at all. I guess that's the most authentic thing I could share about how that felt, because the rest of it is a little hard to pinpoint.
Did it feel like a weight came off, or did things feel lighter in general?
Yeah, I felt expansive. I felt really big. Like I felt like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to explain that, but yeah, I didn't feel contracted anymore. I didn't feel heavy. I felt weightless. I felt large. I felt intimate. The birds singing, the blinds going up in the morning, the sunrise, it just felt like it was never asleep, never asleep.
Has that changed?
No. No. I mean, I think it's maybe matured a little bit through realization process, but it's snowing a little bit. I love the snow. I don't really know where to find the information to see if that's changed or not, to be honest, because it feels like remembering it, God, memory is so beautiful in some way. Like in some way, my memory is terrible, but these visceral, visual memories, like they put me right in. Like I feel like I'm having an awakening right now, just how I had it the first time, just by sharing that. Like, because I actually can't really seem to speak from a storyline. I can only speak from like bringing that experience, that memory into what's being expressed right now. Mm-hmm. So it feels like that right now. And it's so beautiful.
So all the stuff we talked about, like the storyline of your life that we just talked about, how does that relate to what is really right here, right now? Or does it? Does one feel more real than the other, or?
Yeah, like to me, even the story of this morning, or even like just the memory of like us talking an hour ago, it feels like it's so, I don't know. I don't know how to say it, but it feels like it's like never happened. It also feels like it's, I don't know, like I feel so in love with what's happening in the senses, in the visual field, in the feeling sense, and the sounds, that not even in love, just like that's just kind of where attention seems to hang out naturally, that the story of me or my life or how it happened or even my awakening doesn't really, it's not interesting anymore at all. Like in a real deep energetic level, it just feels like it never happened. It's like it literally feels like I read a book. Like I have a bazillion books downstairs, and it's like I read a book about somebody's life, and then I closed the book and I moved on with my life or whatever's happening. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it just feels like a story. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't have the pull. Like it doesn't feel attached or energetically bound to anyone. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just was like some character in a story that was what it was. Yeah. I don't know if that answers it. It's hard to answer that.
Well, anyone watching this knows we're talking about something that is ultimately not, you can't talk about it, but the way we point or talk around it maybe can be helpful and can someone tune into what this is.
Yeah. And what I think was beautiful energetically, just like in this interview for me, was that like when, like I hadn't thought about some of those parts of my life when I was younger, for a long time. Like I just don't really think about them. And which I think is a part of this, like your life stopped happening in a storyline. So you stop collecting memories from it, or bringing those far long memories or traumatic events into this moment. To me, like that's what it feels like. But going back into expressing them and sharing them, I feel like I don't feel attached to them, but I feel like I feel almost like an actress. Like I just shared, a character's life, but it felt really real. It was full embodiment in that moment of sharing that the stories of childhood and the stories of early adulthood and stuff. It felt very real in that moment. Like, and that's one thing that actually I learned in acting was like, you have to be that character, you have to embody that character in order for it to be believable on screen. And, not that I'm making up things about my life. I very well could be, because memory is distorted in its nature, but it did feel like I just embodied that character to share that experience for that moment. And there's nothing wrong with that. I guess my point in sharing this, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having memories. Some people think you get realized, awakening occurs and then I guess this is 4 years later too. So I remember at first I didn't remember a lot of stuff, but now I don't know, I'm jambling. But yeah, I guess you get the point.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Does it? So if anyone's listening and
hard.
Anyone's listening and thinking about this or feeling into it and going, wouldn't it be uncomfortable to live in this moment fully untethered from any storyline at all? That who am I? Who would I be oriented? What do I orient toward? What do I do? Right? Those are the fears that often come up when we talk this directly. But how is it to be without a storyline or any anchor point anywhere, even here, actually?
It feels like if I were to answer that question with words, that it would be like giving you like a picture of me opening up the candy bar and showing you like your favorite candy bar, like that first third of it. And then that's it. But I think okay, is that better?
Yep.
Okay. That was interesting. We just blooped out of reality. So I guess what I want to share with people listening or watching is I don't want to give you the visual or the taste from afar of your favorite candy bar. I want you to experience it. I want you to express it in your own way. So I don't even remember what the question was, but I guess my answer feels energetic. It feels like I just want to stare at you. And that's my answer. Yeah. Because that you recognize from that intuition part. That's what's actually sharing in this whole jabbery talk of my life. That's what's actually being shared. And that's what's actually important and what matters here. So that's my answer. I don't remember the question though, to be honest.
Doesn't matter.
I have no idea.
You answered it really well.
Oh, great. It's like, how can I take this so seriously? And I do on a really deep level, but in one sense, it's like, gosh. We're not talking about anything really important. We're expressing really important things.
But isn't life like serious? Like you got to figure it out, and this awakening, right? It's like a whole puzzle. You got to like figure it all out and
so that's why, Angelo, I think it's really important to to find intuition in the beginning, like when you're starting the journey, like to figure out what that signature feels like, because ultimately, at least in my experience, I can't speak for everybody, but ultimately it feels like I'm living out of a state of instinct and intuition 100% of the day. Even when it feels like, when there's storyline or think like, oh, I'm doing this for this client, or I'm going to this job site, or I'm doing this thing with work or with my partner or whatever it is, it's still completely obvious to me that even though that seems to be operating, sometimes it's not what's actually happening. So in the relative sense, people could look at me and see that like I'm living life, I'm taking care of bills and paying jobs and, doing all this stuff. And it's really not what's actually happening. It's actually not what's ever been happening, but it's living in a state of complete unknown all the time. Every moment is unknown. But for me, I feel like it's important to point out this unknown isn't actually unknown. It's instinct, and instinct it's closer than knowing. It's more intimate than intimacy. There's just absolutely no separation. There's nothing to separate or take apart from it and say it's this way. It's like this. So it's living in this, I don't know, in the relative sense, I don't know what's next. And that, to me, I remember like after the divorce and having to learn how to like take care of myself and be independent and all that stuff. I remember like that was even after First Awakening, but I remember having these still like narratives that would play out that were still attached to emotion body in some way of how will I support myself? How will I make money? How will I take care of the dogs? And thinking of that as like that in that practical way, but it had a heavier weight to it. And now that's just gone. It's just absolutely gone. There's I don't plan and live life again, like I said, and I do, but energetically, it just feels like unknown in the relative sense. Like, I just don't know what's going to show up next. I don't know who I'm going to talk to next. I don't know what I'm going to say next. I don't know if I'm going to completely embarrass myself next by snorting or doing something weird or falling off my chair. I have no idea. But to me, that feels so good. Like I love the unknown. I absolutely love the unknown because knowing was always painful. Knowing was always attached to something. Knowing didn't actually make sense to my truest nature, to that heart that wanted to break open. Knowing didn't make sense to that. So you just get comfortable. You have to get comfortable learning like what your intuition is, relearning that and what that signature feels like, and just keep blindly trusting like you trust the air, and get comfortable being uncomfortable in the unknown, because it is uncomfortable for a little while until one day it's not uncomfortable at all. There's nothing to be uncomfortable with it. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. That's so well said.
Yeah.
I can't.
It's so beautiful. I just love it so much.
I wouldn't add to that. It's beautiful. It's true.
Well, and it's deserved by everybody, which I guess you could say is undeserved in some way, but it's who we are. Mm-hmm. Of course, like I don't have it more than you do. Like how could one person have it more than the other? It's who we are. Mm-hmm. I guess embodiment is maybe a little bit different in what we see from people, after awakening and stuff, but it's still just interpretation. Like it's somebody else's interpretation to say that, oh, she's more enlightened or she's more embodied. I see it that way. I see it as this moment is embodiment. This moment is emptiness. This moment is expression. And nobody ever has it the cup doesn't have it. Actually the cup maybe has it more than I do, but just kidding. But nothing has it more than anything else. Because there is the sense of structure in reality is mind overlay. So there's just no separation anywhere, no connection points.
So if anybody wants to talk to you about this, you do have a way they get a hold of you. I've actually sent you a lot of people who are working through this, and I know you don't have a specific method. You do it all intuitively, just like you're talking now, but it's powerful. It's effective for sure. And you're the number one person I send people to. So if they wanted to get in contact with you and potentially do interactive Zoom meetings or whatever.
Interactive. Yeah, I love that. I love that word. Interactive play.
Yeah. How would they go about doing that?
So I think maybe emails. You could go on the website and book, but you can also email me, and I might give you a little gift if you email me first.
What email address should they use?
Yeah. So email is Violet Richele at Gmail. So VioletRichele at Gmail. And then the website is violet-synergy.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll put those both on the video as well on the description, so anyone can find you if they want to chat about the end of their self or the nature of reality.
Something I wanted to say about it, like, because I have people that ask me, like, well, what are you teaching? What's your approach? And I could say, like, my approach is intuition, like through this moment, like just being present and empty with the person and seeing what needs to be addressed. And that could be on any spectrum. It could be emotion on any spectrum. It could be about non-duality. It could be about self-help, any of that. But I think really what the teaching is the end of structure. So when it's like, where do you ask for that? You ask for, when somebody asks, like, what's the teaching you're teaching? When somebody asks for that, it's because that's how the mind works. It's how identity structure works, is to find a structure, to find some framework. But what awakening is, what this teaching is the end of finding framework, the end of any place to rest, any place to stand from. So it's just totally intuitive based. And I think just energetically, we share that intuition with each other, whoever I'm with. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out, because I know, like, meditation has a certain structure, and I don't think there's anything wrong with structure in certain teachings. It's just, that's not the teaching that I teach. I teach like the end of structure, the end of framework.
I love it. Yeah. That's the right way to teach when you're talking about this, because anything else you give somebody, they're going to hold on to until they really trust the ultimate letting go that never holds on to anything. But yeah, your pointing is great. It's powerful, and people can come in contact with you. You also do satsang.
Yeah, satsang a couple times a month, and then I just added sound meditation once a month that I play with the singing bowls, and I have a tempura instrument that's really beautiful. And I do that. I do kind of guided. Hopefully, when I get my new computer, you'll be able to hear my voice better when I guide through that. But yeah, so sound meditations, monthly satsangs. Sound meditations are free. They're live on Facebook. You don't need a Facebook account to join. And then satsangs are through Patreon. So it's $5 a month, $5.55, I think, actually, a month. And then you get to join in the Zoom meeting of satsang. And then they're streamed on YouTube, so you can watch the playbacks and stuff. But if you want to join and interact with the meeting, you have to sign up on Patreon. And yeah, I love working one-on-one with people. Like, it's just so, I never thought it would be my favorite thing, but it's one of my favorite things, because I just feel like we need support, and it's like awesome to help clarify things and just teach people to trust themselves. That's really what I feel like I'm doing. I'm going like, hey, like, you're the teacher here. You're the one showing me what needs to be looked at. And then let's just look at it together. Let's hold it together energetically. Oh, it's so much snow. It's so beautiful. It's sometimes hard to keep a thought stream when this beauty in front of me, I swear, it's, oh my gosh, I love the snow too. You should put your desk, Angelo, to facing out a window so you could see the snow. But yeah, anyways.
Okay. Well, on that beautiful note, I will put all those links underneath this video in the description. And we will probably do a follow-up at some point, because there's a lot we didn't talk about after that first awakening. But
yeah,
for now, your descriptions and your pointing is very good. I think people will get the sense of it intimately, which is what matters. So again, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And any last thoughts?
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really I feel lucky to have your support in this, and all along, and helping me support other people. So it's just this train or tree of love and support, and it's needed in this field, I guess you could say. So yeah, if it interests anybody, then reach out. You're never alone. I think that's a very valuable thing to make sure people know. You're never alone. You're not the weird one. And yeah, just so much love. Oh, so much love. Mm.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
Yeah. Thank you.